you, everybody. Perfect, thank you. Thank you, everyone who is attending the school year 22-23 administrative review training. Next slide. So my name is Taylor Schorsch, and I'm a program specialist with NDE. Accompanying me today is Allie Lampman, Jessica Fermansky, and Katie Parch. And then just as Katie had mentioned, you're going to go ahead and click on the Google attendance sheet to record your school name and email address. You can use the chat throughout the training to ask any questions and to communicate with your training team. Go ahead and make sure that you are muted as well. Thank you so much. And then this training should last about an hour, so roughly around 3 p.m. We will open up the Q&A from the chat box, answer any questions that have come up. And during this time, you can go ahead and unmute and ask any questions that you may have. Alrighty, so the purpose of today's training is to teach you how to prepare for the review. We have other trainings on our website to support you in program operations. There's a bookkeeper and a food service training on our website if you need to go back to those for any reasons to review. And then for today, you will receive 1 hour of training to count towards meeting annual professional standard requirements. And a training certificate will be emailed to you later this week. So that's, again, super important that you fill out that Google sheet so that we can email you your guys' certificates for attending today. So some learning objectives. NDE will summarize the purpose of the review and steps to ensure compliance. The schools will understand how to operate software to submit review information, and schools will understand how to utilize self-review checklists to prepare for review. Alrighty, so for the administrative review resources, on this page, you'll see a list of resources which are available for sponsors during the review process. This PowerPoint presentation will be made available after this training, and SFA tools will be further explained throughout this training as well. So these tools were also attached to the administrative review training and information email, which was sent by Katie Parch earlier this month. And for more information on AR reviews, that can be found at our website at Nebraska Department of Education Administration Review. So the AR flowchart is a great tool to help schools understand when to complete actions and who completes each action required for the AR reviews. So moving through the chart, you will see on the left-hand side a list of actions which needs to be completed off-site or prior to the reviewer coming to your school. The middle row shows responsibilities which will take place on-site or once your reviewer has come to your school. And then on the right-hand side shows responsibilities to be taken post-site or actions to complete after the review has been taken place. And you can determine which school or reviewer is responsible for which of these tasks by identifying the colors. We made it pretty simple with the gray filled boxes are all of NDE or your reviewer's responsibility. Anything that is yellow is going to be the school or sponsor's responsibility. And then anything with the yellow or with the blue trim, it's going to be a collaboration between NDE and the school sponsors. The AR areas the state agency is responsible for reviewing will be identified in detail shortly. There are questions we gather answers to and information and documentation that schools provide before the NDE staff visits a school. So these are referred to as the off-site questions or questions that you will complete before we are on site to your school meals operation. The off-site questions support the NDE staff in completing a comprehensive assessment of a school meals program. So on this slide, you will see how you can access the off-site assessment questions. On the very top screenshot is the nutrition services. So you would sign in just as if you were going to submit your application or file a claim. You would then click on the compliance tab, which is on the top. The compliance tab is going to pull up all of these review tools, which you will see in the first screenshot on the top. So the program specialist or the reviewer is going to provide the school with a document checklist. It'll look something very similar to what is presented on the screen currently. And this will just show what documents the school needs to upload into the CMP for the reviewer. This is a great tool to help you guys navigate what is required when you are going through your review requirements. And then in order to upload all of those documents that the checklist is asking for, again, you're going to go to the compliance tab, but this time instead of clicking on review forms, you're going to go all the way to the bottom where it says review attachments. Once you click detail, you can then add attachments, which is shown on the bottom, and you can add all of the documents that are required. All right, so I will be further discussing certification and benefit issuance, meal counting, and claiming. Meal applications might be submitted for students also identified in the current school year's match list. In this case, provide to us the one that identifies the higher benefit for the student. So the higher meal benefit should be the one associated with the student in the roster and the meal benefits associated with them. So as reviewers, we want to certify that those students in the roster are receiving the correct meal benefits or make sure that they are on the direct certification match list. So you will provide your reviewer with documentation of each student's meal benefits, including free, reduced, meal price benefits, direct certification match list, and meal applications for school year 22-23. So as I showed you earlier, the offsite assessment requires 100 and 200 level questions to be completed. So to do this, you will click modify, which is highlighted on the top, which will pull up the offsite assessment questions. So try to answer these questions to the best of your ability, knowing that we will answer a similar set of questions and can ask for verification as we may need. For meal counting and claiming, reimbursable meals must meet the National School Lunch Program and School Breakfast Program meal pattern requirements. The point of service meal counting must ensure a reliable meal count includes total of free, reduced price, and paid price meals are being documented. It's also important for the point of service person to be trained in how to identify a reimbursable meal. And these are all things that we further went over in the trainings that I had mentioned are posted on our website. So if you have any questions, you can always address those. And the meal counting and claiming portion in the offsite assessment is associated with the level 300 questions. To answer these, you will again click modify and fill out the questions that are provided. You may ask yourself, what do you do if an inaccurate meal count for the day of the review or the review month are found? So in this case, the School Food Authority can report incorrect meal counts to the SA and complete revision, submit, and resubmit a claim. Your reviewer will watch meal service to ensure the meal counter identifies reimbursable meals correctly, to ensure that the counting is accurate. This is why it's extremely important for the point of service person to be trained in identifying reimbursable meals. And as a reminder, you do not want to count meals served to adults, a la carte items, or seconds in the daily meal total counts. And then I will pass on to I believe it's Ali is next.
Thanks, Taylor. So to wrap up Taylor's section, we're gonna, at the end of each section, we have a review process to go over. And as you can see in the review process, the sponsor is going to be responsible for answering the 100, 200, 300 level offsite questions, ensure the claim for review month is submitted in CMP, provide the daily meal counts for the review month for sites that will be reviewed, and the sponsor will also provide meal counts for the day of the offsite review for sites that were visited and reviewed. And the reviewer is going to review the offsite questions before visiting. They will also review any edit checks that were submitted and reconcile the claim for that review month. Next slide. So the next section on our agenda is meal pattern compliance and dietary specifications. We're going to switch gears a little and jump into a large portion of the menu review that covers areas of meal pattern compliance and dietary specifications. Next slide. We will start off with an overview of meal pattern requirements for this school year. All meals offered this school year must meet the National School Lunch Program, or NSLP, and School Breakfast Program, SBP, meal pattern requirements. These meal patterns emphasize fruits and vegetables, whole grains, and age-appropriate nutrition through the quantity required. Receiving these high-quality nutritious meals will help our students learn better in school. With that being said, the USDA does recognize that there will be challenges in returning to normal operations and the complex meal patterns. We would ask that you contact NDE Nutrition Services with any challenges you are experiencing with supply chain. This is a reminder that there are no longer meal pattern waivers available this year. Next slide. So we will use the Dietary Specification Risk Assessment tool to help review your operations. It's a lot of big words, but really just a series of more questions we ask you to complete. So again, when we talk about the CM portal, maybe some of you have it up and are following along. The Dietary Specification Risk Assessment is completed off-site by you. Your reviewer will work with you on which sections to complete. But in this tool, you will see questions like, do you cook with butter? Do you always serve low sodium vegetables? Are canned fruits in light syrup? Also portion sizes and condiments you use on the regular. We will look at an example of these questions in the portal shortly. So once you've completed that tool, and once we are on site, we as the reviewer, we will also complete the tool based on our visual observation. This isn't to ensure your offsite answers match what is truly going on in your operation. The results of this dietary specification tool will determine if a nutrient analysis is required. Next slide. So we're taking a look at the CM portal, and here you will find the dietary specifications in the review forms section of the compliance tab. In the first picture, the red arrow shows you the 600 series dietary specifications and nutrient analysis in this offsite assessment. We're going to provide a few more steps here so you can reference later on how to actually access the tool and get started once your reviewer contacts you. So you would come down and click modify on the 600 series. The screen's going to appear with some questions.
Hey, Troy's gonna try to set up a Zoom about these lockers here next.
Please mute yourself if you're not muted. That was somebody. Okay, so let's start over with that. So we're gonna provide a few more steps here on how you can access this tool once your reviewer contacts you. You would select the 600 series by clicking modify. And like I said, a screen will appear with 3 questions. You only need to answer question 601 at this point, and you would select option 1, complete the dietary specification assessment tool. Continue knowing an error message may appear, and that's okay because you and your reviewer will come back to this and answer the rest of the questions at a later time. So by answering this question, we have now prompted the assessment tool. So let's take a look on the next screen what that might look like. So you would scroll down further in the offsite list and you would find your site, which is pictured on the top. You select detail and your dietary specification assessment tool appears for breakfast and lunch. Next slide. So here is an example of what you would see when you would click on that tool. These are the questions I shared earlier. So let's go through one together. Let's say number three. Number three asks, low-fat, fat-free milk products are used. This includes yogurt and cottage cheese. So for each answer in this section, you're going to select the number that corresponds to the best description. 1 is always, which is every day, 5 days a week. 2 is most items and most of the time, 3 to 4 days a week. 3 is some items and some time, 1 to 2 days a week. And 4 is never, 0 days of the week. So you continue through the questions, picking the answer that best describes your daily operation. Next slide. So moving with the menu review forward, a majority of this process for menu compliance is completed in this offsite tool we just reviewed. We will also work with you to pick a week of menus to review. We ask you to send menus, production records, and product documentation for that week. We will then work on assessing compliance with meal pattern and dietary specifications for the daily and weekly offerings and quantity. So let's review what can be provided to validate the components and quantities, and also ingredients, your whole grains, things like that that you're serving. These would include a meal pattern checklist, standardized recipes, and product documentation. If you need a review or a refresher on completing production record or meal pattern contributions, we have provided the link on the screen. You can watch this amazing training where our program specialists go into detail with all the requirements. So if you need to reference that, you can do that. So on the next screen, Taylor, we're going to talk about product documentation. So for meat and meat alternates, this can be something you can provide is the child nutrition labels, also referred to as CN labels. I have on the side samples of each item there. You can see the CN label for the chicken drumsticks is at the top. A signed product formulation statement is also acceptable, or the USDA product information sheet. For grains, you could provide, again, the CN label or child nutrition label, a signed product formulation statement, a USDA product information sheet, or the nutritional facts panel, which would include grams and ounces per serving, and the ingredient list. Next slide. Documentation for all other menu items need to be provided for the week of menus. Other ways to provide the meal pattern contribution could be on the production records, through standardized recipes, or like we mentioned in the last screen, with separate product documentation. Your whole grain rich items must have documentation, and please do not submit product labels for fruits, vegetables, condiments, or spices. Next slide. Lastly, we're going to cover fiscal action when out of compliance with meal pattern and dietary specifications. This would include missing meal components or missing production records, repeat violations for milk type or missing vegetable subgroups, or non-reimbursable meals being counted and claimed at the point of sale. Keep in mind that fiscal action is not taking money away, but rather taking funding back that was improperly distributed. I do want to mention here that the USDA is waiving the requirement that fiscal action be applied for missing components due to supply chain issues. In a normal time of not having supply chain issues, all meal pattern requirements must be met. Ongoing flexibility will be given if and when supply chain issues are happening. You must document if this occurs in your operation and the supply chain disruption causes you to be out of compliance with meeting meal pattern. And of course, contact your reviewer if this is happening. I mentioned before that you need to let NDE Nutrition Services know if you're having supply chain issues. Additionally, findings for document supply chain issues will not count towards repeated findings during your next review. Next slide. So the review process, sponsors must answer those dietary specification 600 series questions in the offsite tool in the CN portal. You will also submit production records and product documentation for the requested week. The reviewer will look at the production records for the designated week of review with the acceptable product documentation. We will ensure that meal patterns are being met for breakfast and lunch for each age and grade group. We will also review responses in the portal, so you may get some back and forth from us at that point. And that will be all for my section. So we're about halfway through this training. Jessica, I think you're taking over the next section. Thank you, everyone.
All right, next slide. Thank you, Taylor. And thank you, Allie. All right, so we're moving on further on down the agenda to general program requirements. So we'll look at, or we're going to cover these areas of general compliance. We will go over what the reviewer will be looking at during the AR and what the sponsor or school will want to have ready for each of these topics. Next slide, please. All right, so in CNP, again, just to show, this is a screenshot of what the review form looks like. Each topic that we will review is associated with a set of questions, as Allie mentioned. When you click modify next to each of the topics, CNP will then open up the set of questions for the sponsor or school to answer. So the ones we're going to be reviewing in the next section are selected here with the red arrows. Next slide, please. All right, beginning with civil rights, here is a list of what the reviewer will be looking at. So the non-discrimination statement, this notifies the public of the policy not to discriminate. The statement should be included on program informational materials, and no child shall be denied benefits or be discriminated against because of race, color, national origin, age, sex, or disability. The civil rights complaint procedure. So this is a procedure that outlines the SFA's process if they were to receive a civil rights complaint. So where would that go? Who would handle that, and what would that look like? The And Justice for All poster. This is the poster that serves as an equal opportunity policy notice to children that participate in the child nutrition programs. The poster is required to be posted and visible to students at each site where meals are served. The 2019 version is okay. It has the picture of the USDA building, and it should be in color and 11 by 17 in size. The USDA is not currently printing the new And Justice for All posters, but we hope to get some new ones soon. All right. If you have any additional questions about the civil rights information, you can reference our website, which is linked here for more training and materials. All right, next slide, please. All right, special diets. So we also want to make sure that we continue to accommodate students with special dietary needs when their requests are supported with documentation from a licensed medical professional. The reason we have a medical statement form is because these requests typically do not need to meet meal pattern requirements. The student's medical documentation essentially becomes their meal pattern. This assures that you can comply with the dietary need of the child while also being able to claim that meal as reimbursable. In addition, sponsors can choose to make accommodations for dietary preferences and should keep their district policy in mind when doing so. For this type of request, you want to use the meal accommodation form. Accommodations for preferences must still meet all meal pattern requirements. You can visit our special dietary needs page on the NDA website for forms and additional resources. Next slide, please. So to review, the sponsor or school will answer the 800 series of offsite questions in the review forms in CNP. The questions will include providing the following documentation: the non-discrimination statement. So whatever you're putting on your informational resources, any sort of program information, you're going to want to have that non-discrimination statement ready, and you can just simply copy and paste that into that question. annual civil rights training documentation, the civil rights complaint procedure, and any accommodating special dietary needs procedures that you have. And the reviewer will be looking at those offsite questions and answers, and then any supporting documents. Next slide, please. Food safety requirements. So we know safety in general, including food safety, has been heightened more than ever the last couple of years. Fortunately, the requirements in regard to our programs haven't changed, and you all always had good practices in place. It's important to note that your local health department is the ultimate authority on food safety related questions. So if you have any questions, you can consult with them. If you need state level guidance, please consult Alan at the number provided. You can also view our food safety webpage at the NDE website for more resources. Next slide, please. The review process. The sponsor will want to provide the food safety or HACCP plan. Make sure that's readily available and followed at all meal service sites. You will want to have your most recent health inspection in a visible location posted. Ensure that standard operating procedures are current, and then ensure that products meet the Buy American provision. The reviewer will be reviewing the dates of the most recent health inspection. They'll be reviewing the temperature and thermometer calibration logs, as well as standard operating procedures. Next slide, please. Local wellness policy triennial assessment. Sponsors must have a district-wide local wellness policy that establishes goals and guidelines to promote student wellness. Due to COVID-19, USDA has extended the deadline to complete the triennial assessment to June 30th, 2023. So for this year, you may not have completed that yet during this review, but just know that that will be a future deadline that will be coming up. If you need resources, you can use the Alliance for Healthier Generations assessment, the WellSat, or the CDC's School for Health Index. If you have additional questions, please consult our school wellness policy webpage for more resources. Next page. In the review process, you'll be answering the 1,000 series of offsite questions. Questions include providing the following documents. You'll want to have your local school wellness policy, the public notification of this policy, documentation of the review and update of the wellness policy, and as well as assessment on the implementation of the policy if that has occurred. The reviewer will review all of those offsite questions and answers provided, as well as the supporting documents. Next slide. Smart snacks and competitive foods. We will be looking at all products, the reviewer will be looking at all products, foods and beverages sold during the school day that are not part of a reimbursable meal. Just making sure that they meet Smart Snacks federal standards. Sponsor must submit product documentation to include a CN label, a standardized recipe, a signed product formulation statement, or nutrition facts panel. All right, next slide, please. As part of the offsite review, you will be answering the 1,100 series of questions. Provide a list of food and beverages that are sold a la carte. So these are not items that are part of the reimbursable meal. And then you'll be providing product documentation for some selected items. The reviewer will be reviewing those offsite questions and answers, and will select a sample of items for product documentation review. Next slide. Water requirements. So please ensure that free water is available during meal service, that it's safe to drink. Water in the cafeteria does not have to be bottled. It can be water from a fountain or adjacent to the cafeteria, but it must have cups available so that the children can bring water back to their tables for meal service. All right, next slide, please. On-site monitoring. A sponsor must review each meal site at least once during each site's operation, and this must be completed by February 1st. If your review is prior to February 1st, we may look at last year's on-site documentation. You can utilize the on-site review summary, which is linked here. And then sponsors with more than one school must review all sites operating lunch and then 50% of the sites operating breakfast. Next slide. For the review process, you'll be answering the 900 series of offsite questions, conduct monitoring visits by February 1st, and provide site monitoring forms for reviewed sites. The reviewer will be reviewing those offsite questions that have been entered into CMP, as well as reviewing the site monitoring forms for each review site. Next slide. Reporting and record retention. This is not an all-encompassing list, but gives you a quick picture of the documents that need to be kept on file. So 1 year plus current year is our HACCP records, and then 3 years plus current year, this is just a sample, some all program records such as production records, monitoring forms, meal counts, and certification and verification documents. Next slide. For the review process, the sponsor, of course, you want to retain those program records and then provide a sample of records during the on-site review as requested. The reviewer will verify that all program records are kept for the required time frame. Next slide. School breakfast and summer outreach. Sponsors must inform their families about the school breakfast program and the summer food service program, even if they don't participate in SFSP. So this can be done via your school webpage, a newsletter. You're going to want to retain documentation of this outreach and provide that to the reviewer as requested. Next slide. For the review process, the questions associated with this section are going to be the 1600 series of offsite questions in CMP. You'll, of course, notify the households of the breakfast program if applicable, and notify households of availability of the SFSP program across the state, even if it's not applicable at the district. And as the reviewer, they will be reviewing those offsite questions and looking at that documentation. Next slide. Professional standards requirements. So professional standards establish hiring and training standards to ensure that the school nutrition program personnel in the school lunch program and the school breakfast program have the knowledge and skills to manage and operate the program successfully. You'll want to make sure that you are tracking each staff member's compliance with annual training requirements, as well as the civil rights training and documentation that is required for all staff. And please refer to the NDE website if you have questions on professional standards or need those resources. Next slide. For the review process, you'll be answering the 1200 series of offsite questions in CNP. You'll want to have available the list of all employees that is part of the questions within those 1200 series of questions in CNP, the list of employees, the food safety training for directors and managers and those dates, as well as the training or tracking tool or method that you're utilizing, as well as the supporting documentation for those completed trainings. And the reviewer will review the offsite questions in CMP and any supporting documentation. All right, next slide. I think I'm handing this off to Katie now.
Hey, yes, you are. Thank you, Taylor, Allie, and Jessica, and everyone for joining today. I imagine that some schools here in the room have newer people in bookkeeper or food service director type positions, and I am new-ish to school meals too. So I have been learning more about this process right along with you, and I've learned how important it is to have some written policies and procedures in place to make sure that we as a state agency are doing everything we need to do, and thought I would make a plug for that now at the school level as well. So if you've got newer people in positions, I'm sure you felt some growing pains in that transition, and maybe has helped you appreciate the value of writing some of these things down that need to be like knowledge transfer when one person kind of gives the tasks or duties over to a new person. So some of that obviously would include tracking the way the funds are used, or understanding how those allowable costs for use of program funds need to, be used and tracked and identified. And that's all part of the resource management set of questions available in the CNP system that you will provide information and answers to in the compliance set of offsite review forms. So the idea behind, or the goal of the questions in the 700 series, which addresses resource management, is for the school food authority, or we also sometimes call school sponsors, that they can demonstrate for us that they maintain the nonprofit food service account, where they track literally every penny down to the penny, exactly what was used from the reimbursement they received from the meals they serve, and how much was given to where and for who. So ensure that schools that are not public, the non-public schools in many cases, don't have separate bank accounts to which their monthly reimbursement goes. Instead, it becomes part of the school's account. But we have to ensure, especially in those cases where you don't have a separate pot of funds, so to speak, that all of the income and expenses related to the school meals program is coded correctly. And we know public schools also utilize proper coding to ensure that they could adequately track down to the penny what came into their school meals account and what went out, and for what the money went out. So make sure you've got a solid practice in place for ensuring you could demonstrate to us literally where every penny of program funds was spent. So those internal procedures and controls that you could find referenced into CFR 200, if you're so inclined to go read program regulations, is really what that set of regulations addresses when it comes to necessary documentation related to federal funds. We know that you need to also track the non-program revenue. So any income that the school food service account receives because of sale of second helpings of menu items or second servings, the sale of a la carte items and adult meals, as Taylor mentioned at the top of the training, those are things that cannot be included in a claim for reimbursement, right? Those are non-reimbursable items, but the food service account is going to receive income from the sale of those things. You've got to make sure you've got a proper way to track not only how much of each of those is sold, but the income that comes to the food service account as a result of the sale of those kinds of things. Keep in mind too, that if you are providing meals to adults and they pay for those meals, of course, that those should cover all costs related to preparing the meal, the food, of course, and the labor. You probably know that the NDE recommends an adult meal price each year, which is based on the highest rate of reimbursement for student meals, that is the free rate, in addition to the value of commodities that's contributed to making that meal. So every year we put out a document or notice of what those adult meal prices are. If your school chooses to charge less than the recommended adult meal price, we would also need to see that general funds make a contribution to the account for the difference between what you charge and what the NDE recommends the price should be. Okay, you can hit the next slide, Taylor. So again, you're going to complete the 700 series of forms. Some of the answers you provide to those forms might also trigger a comprehensive review for some components of your resource management practices. You would answer those forms in the offsite review section of questions. Again, those are things that Taylor showed and Allie showed at the top of the training today. And then you'd provide some additional information and documentation as needed or as requested by your reviewer, right? We're responsible for ensuring that we also could tell someone else who comes to look at the work that we do, that we understand how exactly every school that we review tracks every penny of program funds that it uses. So we complete a risk indicator tool, determine Any additional areas of resource management that might require some more intensive review or request of additional documents to demonstrate that the school food authority is being a good steward of those program funds. You can go to the next slide, Taylor. Thank you. You're probably familiar with the procurement requirements. I'm not going to cover these in depth, but just wanted to make sure that you understand the kinds of documentation we would request based on the type of procurement that your school utilizes for things used in the school meals program. So obviously you've got to keep that documentation. Jessica mentioned the record retention requirements. 3 years plus the current is what you should maintain for all program records, including those records that demonstrate what you bought or what you paid for using the funds. You know that micro purchases are those that are less than $10,000 in value. You don't need to solicit bids to purchase things using the micro purchase procurement method. We would just want to see that you are selecting or purchasing from all qualified suppliers in getting the items you need that you serve in your school meals program. So you could just think of it as like spreading the wealth, right? It's a taxpayer publicly supported pot of funds that you receive money from. We want to support as many eligible and qualified suppliers as possible in helping provide the items that you serve to students through the school meals program. Those small purchases lie between $10,000 and $250,000. In that case, you would solicit bids or get price quotes for those items, where price is the thing that weighs the most sort of in the decision that you make. You know, you've got to choose the most cost-effective item when you have purchases in that value range. And very few schools probably utilize formal procurement for a good portion of their school food program expenses. Anything that is in value of $250,000 or more means that the school food authority must solicit proposals or bids, where there might be a few factors considered in awarding a contract, so to speak, but price must be the item in the score that has the most weight or the most value toward making that decision. So any documentation you have where you can justify for us what you purchased and which method of procurement you used is going to be the kind of thing we want to see during the administrative and procurement reviews. You can get to the next slide. So again, you're going to complete the procurement offsite questions using the procurement tool. You're going to complete some of the resource management questions. We talked about the 700 series and the offsite forms in the CNP system. You'll also submit a vendor paid list for the previous school year 21-22, as well as a code of conduct and any other school-specific procurement policies that might be more restrictive than those values I shared on the previous slide. We would request too that you submit selected invoices and some other documentation that might be identified in the offsite questions, but the reviewer that you work with to complete the administrative and procurement reviews is going to be your key point of contact in determining what those invoices should be, which ones they want to look at or need to look at. Then in communication with us and making that decision, you'd submit those items. The reviewer is going to obviously take a look at those invoices. If you utilized any solicitation documentation because of the larger purchases you made that were not micro purchase items, we'd have a look at that. And then we provide some technical assistance as needed if we see any areas of opportunity for improving your procurement practices or in maintaining the necessary documentation to accompany your record keeping related to the way that program funds are spent. You can go to the next slide, Taylor. For sites that operate the Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program, or FFVP, that is part of the administrative review when we come on site to visit a school and as part of the offsite review as well, because we would look at production record kinds of things to determine that you know, what you're putting in the monthly claim system for your FFVP items is in fact items we see on invoices, and what we seek is documented in what your your school food staff is producing each day. So wanted to tip you off to a couple of things that are different this year compared to the last 2 years. Schools should be resuming a traditional fresh fruit vegetable program operation that must operate during the school day, and the fresh fruit vegetable items can't be provided at the same time as other child nutrition programs or meals, right? This is a separate opportunity to get kids a chance to try a fruit or vegetable item maybe they haven't tried before, where the idea is that someday these might be items they see in the school meals program on the fresh fruit vegetable bar, for example. So we want to teach them to like those things, or at least to try new things, to make that school day nutrition really effective and healthy for them. Just like the other child nutrition program or school meals records, you're definitely going to keep the invoices or receipts related to your fresh fruit vegetable items. We're going to compare those to what you're reporting you provide in your monthly claim for reimbursement. If you claim the staff time used to prepare or serve the FFVP items, you definitely want to track that time separately from the time that their staff work in the traditional, we'll call it, school meals program. So you've got staff that maybe prepare breakfast and lunch, and then some or all of them also have a role in preparing the FFVP items for the days those are served. If you claim their time in the FFVP monthly claim, you need to have a way to track for us how you identify the amount of wages you're claiming in a monthly claim. So you need to track their time worked in FFVP separately from the other time they work in order to justify the amount of FFVP award you want to use to support their salary or their hourly wage. So document is the name of the game in this program, which I'm sure you're well aware, but just wanted to remind you of a couple of those things that are going to help make the review a little bit smoother and might require less follow-up or action taken to correct an issue later. Okay, next slide, Taylor. So again, you're going to submit for the month of the review the FFVP records that we request. That would be the items you serve and production records related to those items. As a reviewer, we will validate the claim for the test month or the month of review against the invoices and maybe time certification for staff, that kind of documentation that you provide to us. We will verify the cost documentation is in line with what you're including in your monthly claim for reimbursement. Can go to the next slide. Some sites participate in the after-school snack program. As you know, to receive that money, you do need to comply with the meal pattern requirements of providing at least 2 different component items for the snack. So you're familiar with this in terms of the documentation you need to provide for breakfast and lunch. You need to do the same thing for snack, right? So that daily meal count too is very important for validating the claim in the CNP system, which is what we do for all types of meals you serve, breakfast, lunch, and snack. We're validating the number of breakfasts, lunches, and or snacks you serve against the records you have. So make sure you're keeping that daily meal count for all of the things you're including in your claim for reimbursement at the end of the month. We validate it, reconcile it against what you put in the system. So if you've got different staff who actually serve the meal compared to the folks in your food service group who are pretty familiar with program requirements, you might need to give them a little training to help them ensure that their meal count sheet needs to identify the number of students who actually received a snack, right? You cannot claim for reimbursement the number of snacks you prepared, right? You don't know how many of those actually went into the hands of students, and those are the kind you can count and claim for reimbursement. Only those ones that reach students. Can go to the next slide, Taylor. So again, a lot like what we've seen for breakfast and lunch claim reconciliation and production records related to what was served, those snack counts and program rosters for the review month are going to be important for reconciling the monthly claim. You'll also need to be able to provide this meal counting for the previous 5 days compared to prior to the day of the on-site visit. We want to make sure that what we see on the day we visit is in line with what you normally claim. So just an extra double check for integrity, and might present an opportunity to provide some technical assistance or additional training to the after-school snack staff who might not be part of your normal food service team. We'd also look at a week of production records from the review month, all the documentation you might provide for a combination or a whole grain rich item served during the snack time would also be something we would want to review. And then after school snack program review forms, where someone at your school is making a, so to speak, site visit to the after school snack, where you are checking or double checking that those after school activity staff understand the importance of an accurate meal count, for example. Like I said, we're going to validate all that information, ensure those snacks are reimbursable, make sure the claim in the system matches or is validated by the records you provide. So that's the role that we play there. And if there's an opportunity to provide some technical assistance, then that's when we would take that opportunity. You can go to the next slide, Taylor. So yeah, after the review, you could maybe refer back to the flow chart that Taylor mentioned early in the training. Obviously, we would take time to chat with the staff involved in the on-site visit day or the on-site review day. We would summarize things from the training, offer some commendations for things we think your team is doing really well. This is also an opportunity for us to mention if we think there's opportunity for tightening up some processes or improving information you're sharing with staff who are in charge of specific duties. Anything that needs to be addressed to really bring it in line with what the program requirements are is what we would do in the exit conference. We would send a findings document, a letter, something that identified if we see there is, we're just a noteworthy kind of issue that we saw needed to be corrected. In some cases, that might mean fiscal action is taken, but Allie mentioned we have a little bit of flexibility with fiscal action as far as meeting meal pattern requirements go. So that's something you'll work closely with your reviewer to determine. There might be opportunity to submit a type of corrective action after the day of the review. There also are some things we'll notice that you can fix on the day of the review that probably wouldn't be written into a formal letter after the review is complete. So like I said, we work closely to communicate with you up front, things we think are going really well, but we'll also take time to note how to fix things that we think need a little bit of time and attention. And some of those might require, like I said, a corrective action or a type of follow-up action with a due date or deadline a little bit down the road after your school staff has had time to fix an issue that we think needs a little fixing. So we send a letter identifying what those things are, might request that you fix it and demonstrate to us how you did that. And finally, we would send a letter identifying that the review is closed, you're all set, and then you can, go about the important work of feeding kids until the next time we ask to schedule an administrative review with you. You can go to the next slide, Taylor. Yeah, so this is an opportunity we want to give to you to ask questions you have. Of course, the idea of this was to familiarize folks who are new to the school meals world with the administrative review and procurement review and the process that is required and the attention and time it probably takes to answer all of those questions in the offsite set of forms. We also know there are new people in the school meals world who've never had to navigate this process with the state agency staff before. So just wanted to give you a heads up about what to expect, that you can start working on looking at those questions and providing answers anytime now, and just to help maybe ease a little bit of the stress you might be feeling about the unknown.
Out there for them in a broom, so.
Can you mute your microphone, please? Thank you so much.
In the other room. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so I see a couple of questions in the chat here. Donna, it sounds like, have you accessed the CNP system already and have determined that the compliance tab is gray and not something you can click on?
Yes, Katie, I have. I was just checking it earlier today and it is grayed out.
Okay, that might be a security system like rights issue specific to your user profile. So I will
Okay,
check with another staff member who knows that component of a CNP very well. If there's an adjustment that needs to be made to that, then I'll reach back out to you after we've got that fixed for you.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, I was thinking everyone had access to the review forms. So I will check on that. And when we post the recording of today's training along with the slide deck that we have shared with you today, I will make sure to note have fixed by then for everyone the access to the offsite forms, which come through the compliance tab that you mentioned. Thanks very much.
Okay,
Donna.
thanks.
And then I think Diane is asking when they'll be notified by the auditor or the reviewer of the review week or dates. How much lead time will we have to gather documentation needed for the review? It's a great question. We don't usually start really thinking about doing administrative reviews until, in most cases anyway, until, like maybe last week of October or early November. And at that time, you'll just work one-on-one with the reviewer assigned to you to determine what a good date for the on-site visit is based on how much lead time you think you need to get a good start and maybe even finish on most of those offsite review forms. So we don't start to visit schools until probably mid to late November in most cases. There are some exceptions, of course, but you'll hear from your reviewer sometime, after the last week of October, all the way through. I mean, some of our schools won't hear from a specialist or reviewer regarding the administrative review until after the first of the year. So I think we've got about 30 administrative reviews to complete. So they all take a couple of weeks of time of preparation on site, finishing up tying up the loose ends and closing the review. So it takes us time to get through that list of 30 with our team. Oh, Morgan says she also can't access the compliance tab in CNP. Okay, thank you, Morgan, for confirming you also have the same issue Donna does. We'll check on that on our end and be sure to get that fixed by next week. Same for Jeanette. Yeah, thank you. Allie, Jessica, or Taylor, have you seen other questions that I missed, or have you thought of something that's worth sharing with the group while we have them here? Helpful hint or something you feel like we should have talked about a little bit more.
Katie, I think you got all the questions in the chat, and I didn't have anything additional, but if somebody has a question and they want to unmute, they can also do that.
I can post in the chat the link to the webpage that contains the food service and bookkeeper trainings that our our nutrition services staff delivered this summer. I think those are going to be really helpful. Like we want you to take a look at the offsite questions now and get an early start on those because it's going to take some time to work through answering all of those. And they might trigger some questions you have about, oh gosh, I don't know if we're doing that quite right, but I'm not sure what the right way is. Having a look at the trainings we provided this summer, I think would provide some helpful just reinforcement of what we're going to be looking for when we review the answers from the offsite forms, as well as what we want to see when we're on site. So I'm going to put the link to the training page in the chat. If you click on it, it's going to obviously open up in a browser and then it'll be right there, staring at you tomorrow when you come back to work in the morning, just as a reminder that those resources are there if you think you need them. Emily has a question about civil rights training, and I want to know, did you take or complete the civil rights training offered by ICN, the Institute of Child Nutrition? Yeah, if that's kind of what I'm thinking based on the question Emily asked. So I don't have the answer to how the ICN system works, unfortunately. And Linda's wondering about the HACCP training recordings, saying they won't open for her. So I think Beth did a food safety HACCP training last year that would have been posted from a recording we did in Zoom, a lot like this one today. I've written that in my notes as follow-up. Another thing I should provide information for how to access when I send the link to the recording from today and the slide deck that we used today too. So I'll make sure I include a correction or maybe a new link if that one's broken, a new link for the HACCP training. Thank you, Linda. All right. We'll stay here, obviously, and answer any other questions that come in. We'll try to compile those in a Q&A resource that we can share with the slide deck. Understand many of you are busy. We just want to thank you so much for taking time to hear what we have to share with you today. We're hoping it makes the administrative and procurement review process a little bit smoother for you. And just wait for your program specialist or reviewer to reach out to you. And at that time, you can begin the process of determining when the on-site visit will take place and then work through asking and answering questions you've got as you work through the process. Thanks also for all you do to feed kids each and every day. We appreciate you so much and are always feel privileged to work with you. Thank you. Linda does have a question. I know some people are leaving and answer you while you're here, Linda. A specific form necessary to record civil rights training. And, you know, I don't think that's true. If you complete the ICN's training, which we have a link to on the training webpage in the school meals section of our website, they provide you with a certificate that says you completed it. And if you utilize our PowerPoint and just go through that on your own, you can just kind of make whatever you want to record who in your team participated in that review of the PowerPoint slides and what date you completed it. Pam, you don't have the recording of today's training yet. Yeah, well, it'll get saved into the cloud. We'll download it, clean it up just a little bit, and then I will post it to the administrative review webpage of ours, as well as send a link so you have easy access to it along with the slides that we shared today. Yep, and answers to some of the questions we've received as well. So look for that email to come from me next week. Thanks everybody for joining. Feel free to send questions about the AR and procurement review anytime. Hi, Michelle. Procurement would refer to any purchase you're making with the school food service funds or the reimbursement you're getting from the program. So in some cases, that might mean you're purchasing equipment specific to it, equipment used to make meals, a piece of kitchen equipment or something, or yeah, so it's not just food, but any purchase you make using the money in your food service account. I see, and help. Great question.
I've tried to get into the site and I can't get past the password and the beginning page. And I didn't know if somebody else at my school has ever done it, would that close me out of that? I have to do something different?
It's a great question. I found a help desk email address I put in the chat. I don't know if you send them a message, maybe they'll be able to get back to you with the help you need. I'm sorry that I'm not more help.
No, that's fine. I'm not very computer literate anyway, so it's like anything helps me. So I'll try them. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.